and welcome back to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed keynote speaker for this session. And to ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Gitanjali Gamil, Head of HR Global Commercial Strategy Organization and Janssen Business Development at Johnson & Johnson. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here for your keynote titled Driving People Leadership and Talent Development in an Uncertain Economy. Welcome, Gitanjali, and over to you.
Thank you, Vicki Lynn. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you today, especially to talk about one of the topics that is really, really close to my heart. And I think it's so important in any business environment, but more than ever today, which is about people leadership and talent development. So jumping right in, I wanted to share a little bit before I jump into some of the story that I want to share with you today, that being an HR leader, one of the things that I get to do a lot, and I'm very fortunate to, is speak to a lot of business leaders, both current leaders, but also those who might be aspiring to be leaders of tomorrow or we're looking to hire. And I can tell you that it's very important to me, and it's so telling when I ask questions around how do you develop others? Or what have you done to have an impact on someone else's career? And I think those answers tell you the most about the leaders and the type of leadership environment and culture that you're trying to build. So with that, let me share a little bit of what's the context behind why we're talking about this today. So as you know, we have had a very interesting time for the last couple of years now throughout the world, where there have been a lot of different factors at play. Not all bad, but adding definitely some uncertainty and turbulence to the overall environment. So if you think about the job market, right? We had a few years ago, we were talking about the Great Resignation. Then from there, we went into this period of almost 2 years of inflation and sort of purchasing power erosion from there. Then, we're obviously at a place now where the labor market is strong and our unemployment is fairly low, but it's starting to cool a little bit. There's a little bit more uncertainty amongst job seekers, but it's at that perfect storm kind of space where, there's still a lot of opportunities out there. Your top talent is still in demand. There is all of those pull factors are still there, pulling people into new roles. But at the same time, the morale is, a little mixed, as there's a lot of uncertainty in the environment economically. But then also there are some other trends that are definitely becoming more and more a part of our daily discourse. So if you think about AI and technology, there's so much conversation around generative AI. Just this morning, I was having some fun with ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT to tell me what it thinks about people leadership and talent development. And again, there's so much out there that's being discussed about, well, what type of skills are we going to need? Are there certain jobs that might be displaced? Are there going to be things like how will content be created tomorrow with technology? So there's a lot of debate there. We don't have a lot of answers, but a lot of ongoing debate. And then, of course, another big trend that is of importance in as part of our overall environment and our world of work is like trends around return to office, trends around whether it's hybrid working or remote first or all, in the office. And again, this has added another layer of complexity because there is sort of that reestablishing and renegotiating of norms and ways of working. And this is happening across all industries and, in industries like tech, where there's been a change in how and where they started to where they are in terms of return to office trends. There's obviously been, quite a few dynamics at play too. So why I'm sharing all this is because in this type of environment where there are a lot of different factors, a lot of change ongoing, it becomes more important than ever, I should say, to find that North Star. And that North Star is, I think, really strong leadership and true investment in our talent. And before I tell you a little bit more about why I think it's really important to really give time and energy there, I just wanted to take just a second to tell you a little bit about why I chose these pictures when I'm talking about talent development and people leadership, because I really think that in today's environment, it's important for us to think about leadership as a big aspect of that has to be really nurturing and growing the talent for tomorrow, and for leaders to not only be like looking ahead and having like followership by having just people follow them, but also turning around and pulling others up with them and really facing the talent and pulling them up with them and creating that space for them. So I think that is extremely important. And of course, in HR and talent terms, that can become very tangible in terms of succession and talent development and talent planning. But I think that's really like a core tenet of leadership in my view. So coming back to why do we think it's so important to talk about some of the things we're going to talk about in a minute in terms of talent and leadership. So you can, these are just a few examples. Of course, I'm sure you will see, or if you haven't already, there's a lot of research, a lot of work around why it's important to have great leaders. It's when we've seen that when we have leaders who are empathetic, who spend the time in truly coaching their talent, in developing their skills, in giving them good, constructive, effective feedback, that actually translates into business results like greater profitability, that translates into lower turnover, more retention of top talent. It translates into a more engaged workforce, which is what we want, right? We want a workforce that is willing to give extra, to go above and beyond for their company because they believe in it, they feel engaged, they feel like they belong, and they're thriving. And leaders have a really big part to play in that. They're a big part of that variance in employee engagement scores. So with that being the background, I want to share with you a little bit of, a practical example is how I like to think about it, because I think it's always helpful to think about what are some of the challenges or key questions or key business questions that you have in your organization, and then thinking about what are some of the available resources that we might have and how do we bring them together to really help get to the place that we want to. So that's how I've tried to break down an example that I'll share with you in this space today. So starting out, so one of the groups that I worked with, we were looking at, we look very closely at various types of survey data, and I'm sure most organizations have annual surveys. Many have like pulse surveys that they do time to time so that they can get more in the moment feedback as well as you can have some smaller points of feedback too, whether it's like surveys after town halls or certain big meetings. So similarly, we look at a lot of feedback data as well. And as we were looking at that, we started to see that there was a little bit of a trend around hey, that there's some opportunity when it comes to talent development and how that's landing on people, right? And that was intriguing because we actually do a lot of work in this space. So we're like, hey, what's going on there? Let's try to dig deeper. So we started looking at some of these various sources of feedback, and then we anchored into our annual survey, which again, annual surveys, I know there's a lot of debate because they're not as in the moment. However, for larger trends, they can be a great anchor to start with. So that's what you have, I would say, start there. Because they capture a much larger population. They tend to be, larger surveys. You can have the same questions year after year, so you can track those trends over time. So we looked at, talent development, and under that, the items that we had. We looked at our scores as they compared to an overall average for the organization. We looked at our scores over time to see, hey, we're seeing some growth, but why aren't we seeing the kind of growth that we expected? Where are some of the hotspots? And we were also able to look at it, cut by different views so that we could understand exactly where is it that we have more opportunity. So by doing that, we were able to get very quickly like a view over time of where there were some gaps, I would say, in how people were experiencing the talent development that we were hoping that, that they would feel. And we were also able to see that it was maybe like early to mid career where some of that was coming up more. So what that helped us do was start with the quantitative data that we had through these engagement scores. And again, we didn't create a bunch of new vehicles to do that. We leveraged the surveys that we had, but then really start to think about how do we get a step deeper, right? Because this is fairly high level data, and that doesn't help us really understand, like, but what is it about talent? Like, is it having the right opportunities available, or is it about awareness of opportunities, or is it about getting the right type of feedback? Like, what is it? So what we did following that was, and I think this is a really important and practical step, and it can be scaled down or up to kind of suit, the kind of situation or that you have at hand, is to do some deep dive interviews. So we actually did these completely anonymized interviews working with a partner team, and we were able to really deep dive into questions to understand the engagers as well as the disengagers for our team. So we knew now the group that we were focusing on, and then from there we said, okay, we know that this is the group where they're experiencing some of these gaps. Let's find a representative sample, and let's start by asking them these questions. And I'm so glad that we did that, because that qualitative interview session gave us some really important insights that we wouldn't have had otherwise, because people were actually saying it's not that we don't have enough tools or enough resources or enough opportunities, but what we lack sometimes is, how do we find them, right? How do we curate them? How do we create that path to know where I am today and when I want to go? How can my leader help me with the right feedback, the right coaching, the right tools to get me there? So those things we were able to find because of these qualitative interviews. And then taking it from there, a step forward, we said, okay, so we know that. Now, what do we have in terms of internally tools and resources and data that we can leverage to really help solution this, right? And we have a fantastic internal digital platform for learning and development. Again, even if you don't have a big platform, there are several other alternative ways, simple ways to do it too. But the reason that we had this, we thought, okay, let's leverage what we have. And we have these self-assessments that individuals can do around their skills, which skills are in demand, what do they need for that next role or next development that they're looking for. But also, you can assess what drives you. Like, what is your purpose? And is it being a big leader of people? Is it being a technical expert? What are your aspirations? What type of career path are you looking for? So it really helps you understand and reflect that. In fact, that's why we call it reflect exercises, because it helps you reflect on what you have, what you need to get to where you're trying to go. And then with people leaders, we were able to leverage these coaching modules, so very specific kind of focus, where we said, hey, how do you give better advice around career development? How do you help people navigate all of these resources to really use them to empower them in their career journey? So again, started with quantitative data, supplemented it, did a deeper dive with the qualitative, and then used some of the tools and technology that we had to generate new data sets, right, as well as that are for individuals themselves to use in their own career journey. So that was kind of the process that we took. But of course, there are lots of things that you have to bear in mind as you do that. So what did we learn as we were doing this, right? So as we were going along this journey, one of the things that became very clear early on is leadership and development, people leadership, talent development. This is not just about HR, right? It's not like this HR initiative that we do and then, it becomes a check the box. No, this has to be something that is co-created, co-owned, co-led with your leaders, with your business. And that is extremely key, because ultimately it is those people, leaders and managers and their teams that are interacting every day, that know what drives the business, that know where the pain points are. And it has to be embedded in their ways of working. It has to be in their language. It has to land with them in a way that it's useful. So that was very important. So we started this initiative, which we call the People Leader Initiative, in partnership and really truly led by the business and supported by HR. So that partnership is really key. The other thing that we learned, which is very, very important, that data and technology is your friend. Yes, that is true. And I have a background in data and tech, before I moved into an HR business partnering role. So I can definitely tell you, I'm a big fan of using data. We used it as a diagnostic tool. We also used it, technology, obviously, as we started getting into the solution side of it and how to connect people with different experiences. But it's very important not to forget that ultimately it is about people. So you can have all the best tools and technology and show all the reports and results, but it doesn't really resonate. It doesn't really, come to life until you make it about people and you truly listen. And I'll give you a very quick, practical example. Whenever we do any sessions where we are talking about any of our talent data, or we're introducing a new platform where we're saying, hey, this is how you can use this coaching module, we also always make sure that we're bringing in people who can tell their own personal story in their own words, whether it's about taking a leap of faith and taking an international assignment and making themselves uncomfortable in a new role, learning a new skill, or it's about, someone who shares their experiences of learning leadership skills in a military and then coming and applying those leadership skills in a corporate environment. Those stories and those connections with people are extremely important. So please don't underestimate the value of that. And then finally, I would say activating a community is really key. So that is something that we definitely value and did, is making sure that we're connecting people so that they can come together, have some real transparent discussions about what's working, what's not, what are some of, have some tough conversations around things like, how do you give difficult feedback or receive difficult feedback? So all of those types of things, I think are critical, because you need champions in the business to really help make this successful. So as we come to a close, just wanted to share that, as we think about success, of course, we are going to have to continue to measure it, because I feel like you're never done, and shouldn't be. Like, the bar keeps moving higher. There's always more work to do. So definitely success means you're never done in this space. It's a journey which is ongoing. But I think what's helpful is also to think about, what are some of the metrics that matter to you in terms of the ones that will tell you, are you making the progress that you intend to make? So I'll give you some examples. Like talent movement is a good one, if that's what you're looking to encourage, and to make sure you see that people are moving into different roles, that you're having healthy movement across regions, or however you look at it. Retention rates, again, really, really important in terms of understanding that, and understanding that by different cuts of the data. Time and role is another one that's also helpful, I feel, to look at, to see, do we have a healthy rate of movement? Are people in their roles very long or not long enough? Are they having the kind of movement that they want to have, so that we can understand how we are indeed making progress or not in across some of these metrics? And then, of course, the other thing that I find very helpful is trying to connect to some measurable frameworks when it comes to skills or experiences. This is something that I've found to be very helpful when we're trying to help people understand how they can practically grow and develop in their careers, that they can have, not only understand through self-assessments what skills or what experiences they have and but also what good looks like, right? So what they would need to get towards achieving whatever their goal is. So I think dedicating some time and spending some time into building that can be really helpful in connecting that to then to actual movement. And then finally, communication is key. It has to be two-way. It's important to listen to people, to make sure that you're listening to the feedback that you're getting, but at the same time, it's also important to share back what you're doing with that feedback. That is a critical thing, which we try to stay very, very close to. And I would say that that's really important in this journey of talent development and strong leadership, is to make sure that we're always listening and always sharing back what we're doing so that we can get further feedback and we close that loop. So I know we're getting close to time, so I'm going to close now with this and make some time for questions. And I know that there's a few questions that have come up in the chat, so if you give me just a minute. Okay, let me just get to. So one of the questions that I see it says, what are some of the key talent trends you are seeing? Okay, good question. It's a big question because there are a lot of things that are going on in the world of talent. I think one of the things that I have seen is that, and I think this is rightly so, by the way, I think there's an expectation from talent, from employees at various levels and various stages of their career, to focus on holistic well-being, to focus on making sure that they're doing well in their careers, but that they're also doing well in terms of their wellness. They feel like they can bring their authentic self to work, and in making sure that it's not like just you come to work and you present kind of this professional face and you go home, but that you really feel fulfilled. You feel like you're part of something bigger than you, that it aligns with your company's purpose, aligns with your own individual purpose. So I think that's extremely important. We've seen that, and then that obviously translates in the HR world into how you think about total rewards, how you think about everything from like compensation to time off and everything in between. So that's definitely one of the the big trends that I've seen. And the other talent trend, I would say, I'm just trying to like quickly answer some. I'm pushing a lot of things together. I think the importance of making sure that we are being forward-looking in terms of thinking of skills and thinking of what are the different skills that you need to acquire, and not thinking of just like this career ladder and what is the next step and how do we get there, but how do you acquire different skills and expand your career portfolio and really grow through that, which means you might take moves that are atypical and not necessarily I do this and then the next step is the manager of this and next step is the director of that, but instead you really gather the right tools in your toolkit. So I think those are like some quick ones, but there's a lot more to that. Thank you for the question. Okay. So another question I see, some HR practitioners say that all data is good data. Is this true? Which data is most valuable for workforce development? Great question. Well, I don't say that. I say that sometimes if the data quality is not good, that is not good data, and that's not very useful. So I would definitely say that some of the most valuable data, if you're looking at development, I think clearly any kind of feedback data that you can get, any type of survey data, if it's more regular, then that's even better. So if you're able to do regular pulse surveys of things like that, that's very helpful to have. But then on the outcome side, right? Measuring, being able to measure again some of the things I mentioned, talent movement, retention, if there's anything that you can get around well-being, it could even be through feedback data, performance, right? Like all of those things I think are critical. And then of course they can translate into business results as well, like your top line, bottom line data, but that requires a little bit more work to do some of those studies to tie that together, but definitely a lot can be done with some of those data sets as well. And then let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Where have you seen HR leaders make the biggest mistakes when managing talent development? Oh, good question. I think people have made mistakes. I think people make mistakes when they just lean into, I'm trying to think of the best word for this, like lean into some stereotypes, right? Rather than actually observing themselves, whether it's through large quantitative data, but also through talking to employees and understanding what's going on. I'll just give you an example. Like if we start leaning too much into, well, this is what millennials like, or this is what Gen Z doesn't like. I think not getting into those generalizations, but really like testing what people are telling you for yourself and looking at what the data is telling you, what people are telling you. I think that's extremely important. When we don't do that, we create solutions, whether they are infrastructural solutions, whether they're, talent programs that don't quite land because we went by just like these broad trends. I think it's good to keep an eye on broad trends, but it's important to test them yourself rather than take them, as general truths. Let me see. Is there a question I missed? Oh, so there's a question that says, won't many companies risk access to a larger talent pool by pushing a return to office? Okay, so if I think I got this right way, I think what you're asking is, if you have a return to the office, like does that limit the pool to, that you have access to in terms of talent? So I think, that, again, like anything else, there's always pros and cons to every approach. And I'm sure there are some people for whom it is just, not a way that they would work and, they would want to be fully remote. And that is potentially a group then that you wouldn't have access to if there's no opportunity to work remotely. But from what at least I have observed, a lot of companies are going through to more of a hybrid approach. So I think there's a little bit of room for everything. So you can have different types of talent and different talent access models. And depending on what the type of roles are, there can be differences in what type of working situation works. But yeah, there's pros and cons. So depending on what people are more comfortable with and what their needs are, they would have to find that right match. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was great to speak with you today, and I'm going to toss it back to Vicky Lynn.
Thank you, Gitanjali, for what a thoughtful and practical keynote. Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone for joining us today for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you so much again.